time we saw Jordan Romano come out back-to-back days and throw two innings.
Yes, sir, there she goes.
Hello and welcome to episode 223 of Section 138. It is a sweep in good old Boston for the Toronto Blue Jays. They have now won 3 in a row against the Red Sox and are coming off a fantastic road trip, including a swing to New York and taking 3 of 4 from the mighty Yankees. Bryson, how are you?
I'm doing good, Mark, especially after tonight. I mean, we're recording this right after the epic game on the Thursday night, over 4 hours in Boston, extra innings. And of course, you can't forget that Yankee series as well that we missed last weekend. So this was a 6-1 road trip. And I guess just to recap the recent one, there's just something about Fenway Park and this team, just, I guess, getting the best out of the Jays in terms of even when things are going back and forth, they find ways to win at Fenway Park. But overall, a great road trip. After the last few road trips have been a bit shaky, we know that the team was kind of just getting back in a groove when the road trip started. So it's good to see where this team is at the end of the road trip. And I think confidence is definitely coming back. I know the last time we recorded, you still weren't as sold as I was when I kind of had that intro. So I will ask you, are you kind of feeling a little bit better after this road trip?
How could I say no? You go 6-1 against two very potent AL East rivals, even though the Red Sox aren't really in the mix, or they're kind of on the verge of being in the mix right now. I mean, you go 6-1 against a combination of the Red Sox and the Yankees on the road, no less. You can't say no to being optimistic about this team. But I do stand by what I said last time, because last time we recorded, it was after a 2-1 series loss against the Baltimore Orioles. The Blue Jays were on the verge of being swept. And you go back to even that final game of that series, and Ross Stripling throws a perfect game through 6 innings, and the Blue Jays can't score a run. Like, it was really the final 3 innings of that game that kind of saved them from being totally embarrassed in that series. So I stand by what I said last time. But yes, obviously a great situation for the Blue Jays to be in. 6-1 road trip. You mentioned it there, but let's start with tonight's game, a wild 4.5-hour affair, 10 innings. For the second night in a row, the Blue Jays get big defensive plays from Matt Chapman. Again, the Blue Jays get a perfect slide and a little bit of, defensive luck in terms of the Kevin Biggio coming home to score in the 10th inning. And then, of course, the Blue Jays get incredible relief performances again from Jordan Romano, from other guys, including Anthony Bass. And of course, we know on previous nights they get incredible relief performances from guys like Yimi Garcia, guys like, man, there's just so many names involved that did things this series. It kind of blows your mind. But I mean, David Phelps with a 2-inning save, or not saved, but finishing out the ball game. Just great performances all around for the Blue Jays. You couldn't ask for anything more. And we know this team runs hot and we know this team runs cold, but right now you got to be feeling good about what the Jays are doing.
You have to. I mean, this series alone, you were talking about it, the bullpen, something that it's been a topic of conversation basically all year for us in terms of, what they're missing, how much better it can be, us not exactly being as sold with the trade deadline. It kind of came all together in this series. You were talking about it, and of course, just all the relievers here that just is, I guess you want to start off with the bullpen that I guess just made things for the Jays to win these games, especially these last 2 games in extra innings. Before this series, I believe that, like, in terms of this year, the Jays haven't exactly played well in extra innings. So the fact that they were finding ways to win in extra innings, especially 2 straight days at Fenway Park, and the fact that you're sweeping another series at Fenway Park to begin with, that just seems a lot of that is just very difficult to begin with. So I think the only negative part from the bullpen through the last 3 days, and you're going to laugh with this, is probably from game 1 with Yusei Kikuchi. I mean, other than that, I think everything was pretty much going as per plan. You were talking about it with David Phelps, 2 great innings in game. This was going back to game 1, of course, other than Kikuchi. And then I think the real highlight, or there was a really good moment with Anthony Bass when he came on pretty much with runners on base, and he found a way to get out of it. And of course, that was later in the game leading up to extra innings, which pretty much gave the Jays a good chance in extra innings to win. That was definitely one of the highlights for me from game 2 with that. And of course, with Adam Simber having a good appearance, you talk about with Jimmy Garcia. Jordan Romano is my next highlight. Of course, 2 straight days now he works multiple innings, or I should just say he throws a lot of pitches. You go to the game 1, or I should say his first game of the series. In game 2, he throws 15 pitches, he completes the save, and then of course he gets the win. And then if you go into game 3, he comes in early, he pitches 2 innings, and you haven't really seen that this year in terms of him pitching multiple innings or multiple batters in back-to-back days like that. You have to imagine he's got a good off day coming tomorrow. But the fact that the Jays also made it worth it because of how used or overworked this bullpen was this series, you make it worth it going into the homestand. The fact that you were able to sweep the Red Sox, the fact that it came out on top, I think that's a massive highlight, of course, with that. So you had Romano, of course, 28 pitches today in game 3. And of course, you got to look behind him with who came in earlier in the game, of course, with Anthony Bass again, with Adam Simber again. And the fact with Jordan Romano coming into the game and, of course, getting out of a bases loaded jam, that was also really huge. There were really good moments with that the team was able to escape. And of course, earlier in the game as well, escaping a leadoff triple from Reese McGuire, where Teoscar Hernandez kind of misplayed the ball in right field. Another moment of this series where they were able to avoid disaster from that. There was tons of opportunities that the Red Sox had to put this team away today, especially today in game 3. I think their runners in scoring position were 3 for 20 in game 3. And the bullpen was pretty much the reason why they were able to limit Boston in that. And the fact that they were able to come out on top in the offense that they put together was just enough to get by the Red Sox. It was huge. And of course, we're going to talk about the offense in a little bit, so I'll save that. But in terms of the bullpen alone, you just multiple appearances from these guys that we've mentioned, and the fact that they were able to shut down the Red Sox again to complete the sweep. It's just, you're not used to seeing that, and it is a lot to ask for when you think of it. So it's not like you want to get used to it, but the fact that they were able to do that once again is really crucial and really important. Is, of course, this AL wildcard race continues to tighten up, that the fact they're able to win these games and steal these games, you can't explain how important it is for, the long run and the rest of the season. And these could be games that you look back on in October where you say, these games especially were definitely highlights. And if you want to do that, you can there's definitely a couple games, especially the New York series and this past series in Boston, that you can definitely look back on and say this was a really important game that happened back in August.
Yeah, this entire road trip, you can just rewatch it endlessly because even just this series in Boston, incredible moment after incredible moment for the Blue Jays. And I know Pat Tabler said it at the end of tonight's game, but it's an instant classic for the Blue Jays. And especially given the context of what they're going through right now and the importance of this series and the schedule of things and what they're trying to do and build up ground in the wild card race and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think the highlight for me out of the bullpen was Jordan Romano working his way out of a bases loaded, none out jam against the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park, bottom of the ninth. It's do or die. And then not only that, but then he comes out the next inning and pitches a whole nother inning against the Red Sox and still finishes the job. So to me, that was the highlight of all of this. It reminds me of, I think of this whenever there's a bases loaded, none out situation and the pitcher gets out of it. But there was a game back in 2014 or 2015 at Tropicana Field where Aaron Loup came in and loaded the bases themselves and then got out of it. And that's always what I think of, just kind of as a gold standard of being a reliever, getting in trouble, and then getting yourself out of it. And Jordan Romano did it perfectly. So that was a highlight out of the bullpen for me this series. And I think if we're looking for takeaways from what the bullpen did this series, I think the workload that we saw from the Blue Jays is unlike anything we've seen really all year, or really, I think even going back to kind of like 2020, 2019, the first time that we've seen in a 3-game set this level of intensity and workload for a lot of these guys out of the bullpen. Like, when was the last time we saw Jordan Romano come out back-to-back days and throw 2 innings? Like, I can't recall the time that has happened. And I think the end result of all of this, what we're learning from this, is how willing the Blue Jays are, willing to push their relievers when the rubber meets the road. And that's obviously important as we come down the stretch and the Blue Jays are expected to make the playoffs. And we know that it's going to be a 3-game series for the wild card. And then you don't have an off day and you go straight into the American League Division Series. Like the postseason this year is kind of condensed and it's a level of intensity that we haven't seen the Blue Jays go through. But this 3-game series and the willingness that the Blue Jays had to push their relievers and have Jordan Romano throw 25, 30 pitches on back-to-back nights and have someone like David Phelps go that deep and, have Anthony Bass come in back-to-back nights, that type of thing. I think it shows how the Blue Jays will treat the postseason if they get there, and hopefully they do. And I'm really encouraged that not only were they willing to push the relievers that far, but also the fact that the relievers showed up and performed in those instances.
Absolutely. And you have to think of the postseason like that. And I think a result of the lockout is the reason why it is so condensed. So you're going to have a similar thing in terms of a turnaround, in terms of the amount of games you play. You like what you're seeing from that, the fact that they're showing that, this bullpen now, finished product at the end of the year, perhaps can maybe handle something like that. I think it was also really relieving to see from the bullpen, especially. And, other than that, I think other like just strategic moves in general for me, especially coming from like John Schneider, I guess I give him a lot of credit. Just strategic moves other than the bullpen from him, in terms of, just working around batters, intentionally walking guys, just, I guess, play or decisions he made in game 2 and game 3 that really panned out really well. For example, there was a situation in game 2 where Cordero was walked to bring up, I think it was Bobby Dalbec, or to avoid the lefty. Something like that happened in game 2 that really worked really clean for the Jays and really avoided trouble. And then you see it the next day as well. Today in game 3, there was another instance where they did that to load the bases when Romano came on to get out of that jam. I thought a lot of them, just the decisions, even coming from the coaching staff, I thought were really on point throughout the series as well. And just, these are things that are likely going to come up again in the playoffs. And that's another probably thing that will, in terms of, making a decision in terms of pitching to people or not pitching to people. And of course, the bullpen management, it always comes back to that. The fact that they were able to do that over the course of 3 days, where it worked out pretty much in every single form for the bullpen, I think was really also intriguing for that. And of course, it is going to be translating down to the bullpen, down to the playoffs because of, or what you saw throughout the last 3 days. Of course, you might see something very similar in terms of a workload like that, in terms of a turnaround, in terms of consecutive games. So that's why it's definitely important for that to happen. And of course, it's going to be like this the rest of the year. I mean, every time we record, it seems that the wild card race gets tighter and tighter. Like, I believe now pretty much all 3 teams currently in that wild card spot are basically within half of a game of each other, and that's the Mariners, the Jays, and the Tampa Bay Rays. As much as they've built a little bit of a distance, not too much though, from teams like Baltimore and Cleveland. I think it's now just 2 games, or I know Cleveland and Minnesota are going back for the AL Central. So one of those 2 teams is also in that wild card race, and you're separated by 2 games, even though it's still very close, even though you've separated a little bit. Those 3 teams currently in that position are all pretty much within half a game of each other. So it's going to be very intense throughout the rest, the next 4 or 5 weeks as well. And I think it's something that, whether you like it or not, it's something that we got to get used to in terms of, close games and exciting baseball, and, late game jams like this, or game situations like this, where you're going to need a crucial outing from somebody like Jordan Romano, or just the bullpen in general.
Yeah, just to provide the numbers on the wild card race as it stands now, and knowing that it's going to change in 24 hours time, and with the potential to change quite dramatically. But right now, as it stands, the Rays lead by half a game over the Blue Jays. The Rays are even hotter than the Jays right now. The Rays have won 6 straight, 8 of their last 10. They're a half game up on the Jays. The Jays are a game up on Seattle, and Seattle, holding that last wild card spot, is 2.5 up on Baltimore. Baltimore is 2.5 up on Minnesota. And then you mentioned Cleveland, Minnesota going back and forth for the AL Central lead. Cleveland right now is 2 games back of the Jays. So even if they weren't leading the division, they wouldn't be in a wild card spot. They'd be a game back of a wild card spot, a game back of Seattle. So, I mean, just that alone, like, so many teams involved, very little separating them. And yeah, like, I guess we're seeing a little bit separate the Blue Jays from teams, like you mentioned, like Baltimore and Minnesota that used to be in the mix. And, pretty recently, some of them were ahead of the Jays in the race. But um, yeah, I mean, it's super tight. All these game matters, and it's really encouraging to see them treating it as a playoff case. And I think another one of those strategy situations that I thought was interesting was today we saw the 5-man infield. I know we've seen a 4-man outfield a lot, but I've I'm sure they've done it. I can't come up with an instance off the top of my head where the Jays have gone to the 5-man infield anytime recently. And maybe it was just, who the Red Sox had up at the plate. And I think it was Cordero in one of the situations. I'm not sure, but Merrifield moving from the outfield to the infield. It was interesting to see. And I mean, you love the intensity of it. You love the Blue Jays taking each and every play and each and every at bat as life or death, because in that situation it was. And of course, it's not a do or die game, but soon enough in a month it may be. So, yeah, that was cool to see and a lot of fun to watch. Let's talk individual performances on the offensive side of things, or let's start here, the defensive side of things. Matt Chapman. I mean, this guy, like, words can't describe what he's doing right now for the Blue Jays. And let's just set the offensive side, because I think he's been better offensively than any of us expected this year. You knew when the Blue Jays traded for him that they are getting a defensive first, a glove first third baseman, and the offense is second. But what he's doing offensively is great and more than the Blue Jays bargained for. And you're over the moon with what he's doing. I mean, either he has the team lead now for home runs or he's close to the team lead. Like, he's right up there with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And who could have expected that at the start of the season? But I don't want to talk about his offense. I want to talk about his defense, because that was otherworldly this series. I mean, the double play, the flip behind his back, backhand to Bo Bichette, throws to first for the insane double play. The play today in the ninth inning that saved the Blue Jays with one out, Chapman grabbing the ball, having the wherewithal to go to third, step on the base, and throw to first, which surprised, we learned in the post-game interview, surprised Kevin Biggio, surprised Jordan Romano, surprised all of us watching, surprised Pat Tabler, surprised Dan Schulman. I mean, the list goes on and on of people that have been impressed by what Matt Chapman did this series. And it really goes to show that the Blue Jays front office emphasis on run prevention, on defense this season and years past, but especially this season, has paid it off, because man, oh man, Matt Chapman, that any ball hit to the left side of the infield and hit down the line to Chapman, it's game over, because he is so good. And we're seeing that this year. And this series, I mean, you can look at these games, a 3-2 win yesterday, a 6-5 win today. You can look at the couple plays that Matt Chapman said or made and say, if he doesn't make those, the Blue Jays are walking out of this with, a series loss, only winning one game in Boston. And that's, to have one player make that much of an impact defensively, I mean, that trade is instantly worth it. And we still got a couple more years of him. So lots of fun to watch. And what a series defensively for Matt Chapman.
He was by far defensively, of course, the highlight. I mean, you talked about the play tonight. The fact of like how calm he was too when he got that liner from Kike Hernandez. He was calm. He goes to third base, and then of course, or he steps on third base, throws it to first, and then even the overhead shot when they showed it, it shows Jordan Romano pointing for him to throw it at home on that play as well. So the fact that he was that confident, obviously he's not trying to ignore his teammate, but the fact that he was that confident that he was able to escape the jam, knowing that he may be able to get away with getting 2 outs here, the double play himself, the fact that he was able to do that and be calm with it, to me, it's just how easy he made that look, and to know truly how hard of a play that is. For me, of course, that's definitely a highlight. And just in general, definitely one of the reasons for the Jays winning these games later on, especially in game 2 as well. I mean, he said it he said it in his interview in game 2. Of course, the play I'm talking about with the backhanded flip that he had in game 2, that he thought it was one of the best plays of his career in general. And I think Danny Jansen was the one that said it wasn't, but either way, probably as a Blue Jay, that was was definitely up there and may be the best play he made. And of course, you can pinpoint other plays that he made, of course, going back to the game tonight where he did that double play, but that backhanded flip for me as well was definitely the highlight. And also StatCast tracked it in terms of his backhanded flip when he did that, and it came back at 37.4 miles per hour. So the fact that he was able to get a lot of zip on that on a backhanded flip, I mean, you see people have seen the angle of it. I'm sure so many people have seen the video of it. The fact that he was able to get that off as well for the Jays, and of course leading to another double play, it just, words cannot describe how important he is defensively. And of course, the bat's always going to be a plus. You talked about it. As much as it is a plus, and as much as he's been hitting the ball so good since the second half of the season, it's still, the defense is still the prime example, or just the leader, and just to show how valuable it truly is for Matt Chapman to be defensive, and how valuable it is for the team, and of course how important it is, and just to pretty much, the highlight for him on this team is definitely leading that infield with defense, because you see different situations with different players. I hate to pinpoint or pick on people, but of course there was a situation tonight with Bo Bichette defensively, where that basically costed the Jays one of their first leads heading into extras. Matt Chapman able to kind of pick everybody up and to kind of lead the way in terms of, the other way around, of course, making plays defensively and leading the way in the infield, on the corner infield. It's truly special to watch. I mean, we know what we were getting into when Matt Chapman was traded here, and the fact that he is still playing at an elite level defensively is definitely something that, it's just so assuring to see that from a third baseman to do that on this team, and just to show how valuable he is again. And of course, the offense as well, which comes, and of course, it has showed up in the second half of the season. You got to love all around the performance from Matt Chapman, and he definitely individually, like you were talking about, definitely one of the highlights from this series, and definitely one of the reasons for, of course, especially the game 2 and the game 3 win, which was able to get the Jays on top and complete the sweep over the Red Sox.
Yeah. And you talked about, the Bo Bichette error, and I know it wasn't called an error, but later in the game, I think it was in the 9th, right? With Reese McGuire batting. It was, a play hit to right field. Teoscar Hernandez should have been able to limit Reese McGuire to a single. Instead, the ball kind of skips past his glove and gets into that crazy right field corner at Fenway. And Reese McGuire ends up at third. And, praise be to Jordan Romano for getting out of that inning. But yeah, I mean, just the sloppy-ish defense in other parts of the field really goes to show just how dominant Matt Chapman is. And like I said, his offensive numbers are nothing to scoff at. He's got a 118 OPS plus this season. And for a guy that has a really good shot of winning a gold glove, man, oh man, you take that every single day. Let's talk more about standouts on the offensive side of things, because I want to talk about George Springer. This guy, we talk about unreal defense. George Springer is unreal offensively. I can't wrap my head around the fact that he goes on the injured list for 10 days, 12 days, whatever it was, comes back, and it's like he never left. And more than just never left, like he is at the top of his play. He is unreal right now. And I don't understand how one guy, and this isn't the first time that George Springer's done this. Like, he has done this before where he's gone on the injury list, come back and dominated instantly. I don't understand how this guy can never miss a beat. And I'm so impressed. And that's what, to me, is redeeming him right now, because obviously the injuries have been rough to go through for the Blue Jays. But the fact that he can be injured and not miss a beat, come back and dominate. And of course, right now is when the Blue Jays need him to perform. The Blue Jays are paying him $150 million for September 1st onwards, essentially. And I know it's not quite September yet, but point being, they are paying him for the important games. He is that guy who, regardless what his regular season stats are, 2020, 2021, 2017, 2019, whatever year it was, George Springer comes into the postseason. He comes into games that matter, and he dominates. And that's what he did last weekend, or this past weekend in New York. That's what he did in Boston. Just looking back at his stats, since he came back off the injured list August 15th, he has at least one hit in every single game. He has, let's count it, 1, 2, 3, 4 multi-hit games And he also has a whole bunch of walks, including today's game where he walked 3 times. And to me, that's the biggest indication that people just don't want to pitch to him right now because he's finding a way to, whatever it is, get a hit and get on base. And we saw, pinch hit appearances, first pitch, instantly, a single to whatever it was, shallow right field or whatever. Like, I can't speak this guy's praises enough. I mean, he is just unreal. He's automatic. Whenever he comes to the plate, it seems like he always finds a way to make an impact. And you're paying him for September, you're paying him for October, and the fact that he's been injured is a problem, obviously. But if he can keep this up in the games that matter, I don't care if he misses 40 games a year because this is what the Blue Jays are paying him for, and he can't complain with what he's doing right now.
No. And I think the funny part or the most hilarious part to me is what you were talking about at the beginning is that sorry, the night before or even just he'll play well, but then the next day he'll be dealing with some sort of issue. He'll come back and then he'll pick up right where he left off. And we weren't able to discuss that because of the Yankee series where he was dealing with a knee issue after he fouled the ball off his knee. And then he pretty much sat out the rest of the Yankee series. So, he was already hot coming into that series. So I kind of had it in the back of my head, at least for me, is that, when he comes back, is he going to be as hot as he was beforehand? How long is it going to take him this time to get going? No issues whatsoever. I mean, he took off right away, coming right back off. Just after a couple days off, you were talking about it in terms of his stats. I mean, pretty much hitting 500, I think, over his last, or even over that, I should say, in his last 7 games. And I think a WRC plus of 314 in his last 7 games. That was coming into tonight. And you were talking about it in terms of batting average. I think it's north of 600 over his last 25 at bats. And of course, that's probably going up even further after tonight's game. So I saw that, and it just shows you how valuable he truly is. And this is probably one of the best hot streaks that he's ever been on. And he's also doing this with a bad elbow. So that also raises some questions because I think a lot of people have also been discussing this, and I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I have probably a good idea that you have in terms of the idea of now, because of how good he's playing. And of course, you want George Springer to be in the outfield in a perfect world, but if he's playing so well like he is right now, there really is no rush to get him back into center field because of that. And I know the team was saying that he's probably still a little bit away, but he's getting closer to being in center field occasionally. That also kind of raised not a debate, but just questions that, do you really want to mess with that in terms of putting him back in the outfield and maybe taking a risk if he lands on it, making a catch, or if he throws a ball and he re-aggravates his elbow? Do you really want to, take that risk and just to put him back in the outfield while he's swinging the hottest he's ever have, at least for the first time in a long time? And I think the most important part is, even, of course, he could be a really good fielder, but I think the most important part is that you have to keep his bat in the lineup as much as you can. You want to keep him as healthy as you can for the rest of the season, like you were talking about it. You're paying him for September, you're paying him for October. So I thought that was an interesting, I guess, conversation that people were having about that in terms of not rushing him. And of course, I think also the fact that he is playing this well definitely gives, I guess, the Jays not as much pressure to move him back to center field as quick as maybe they imagined. Of course, you talk about it. If he's going to be DHing a lot, we all know that takes flexibility away from, guys like Alejandro Kirk DHing a lot and other guys DHing a lot. That's the only downfall of it. But of course, if this is the only way to keep George Springer in the lineup, I guess, for the rest of the way, kind of minimizing as much risk as you can, maybe you do that a little bit more, or maybe in terms of moving him back to center field, you take a little bit more of a little bit more patience and you're a little bit more cautious with the move. And I think that's the good word to use. But in terms of this series alone, I mean, it's just crazy that even when not starting, coming off the bench, he's making an impact. He had pretty much the same impact in New York in one of those, the last game of the series where he came off the bench, quick pinch hit, and pretty much started a rally in terms of that. So it was at some point during the Yankee series when he did that, and then all of a sudden he goes right, he's already replaced. But it just shows how valuable he can be even through one at bat, and that was throughout this road trip. And of course with the Boston series, this entire team offensively for the most part plays really well at Fenway Park, and George Springer is also one of those guys who does that. And the fact that he's doing all of this, most of this without even hitting a home run, is also more impressive, or at least impressive with me, because he's using all aspects of the field right now. In terms of being hot, he is finding any possible way to get on base. And I think tonight was also a good another good showing from him at the plate with 3 walks. It's just crazy to see how good he is doing this, even with, I guess, essentially one elbow, or one healthy elbow. And I think that also, there's definitely a lot of questions in terms of how much quicker, or I should say how much longer, until a move back to center field happens. Is it really worth the risk? So I'm curious to hear what you thought about that one, but I think that's definitely an interesting conversation that's been taking part over the last few days.
Yeah, it's kind of I know the comparison a lot of people have been using is Bryce Tarper, because he's kind of done the same thing with the Phillies. They've just basically decided, look, your bat is too valuable to risk you getting injured in the field, as we have seen you do time in and time out. And yeah, I don't think it's absurd to suggest that with George Springer. Like, obviously, in a perfect world, he's going to be playing center field, or playing right field. Maybe the Blue Jays move him there. Like, that is where he's playing in a perfect world, because he can still be impactful on that side of the ball. But if you're presented with a choice of him doing what he's doing now and impacting the Blue Jays in the way he is now, or being on the injured list, like, you take this 10 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100. Like, I don't know. I think it's a conversation the Blue Jays need to strongly consider in the offseason. I have a feeling at this point in the season, they have already kind of decided to take that approach. Whether they do that next year remains to be seen. But I mean, look, the situation the Blue Jays are in right now, they have enough guys to do it. They have Whit Merrifield. They got him at the deadline. They have Jackie Bradley Jr. They signed him to a deal after the Red Sox DFA'd him. Like, they have the guys to do this. I don't see why you would say no if it keeps George Springer producing like he is right now. And like, if you're handcuffed in a situation, if you get to the point where Whit Merrifield is injured, or JBJ is injured, or neither of them are performing offensively, or for some reason their defense is atrocious, like, yeah, you obviously push George Springer to be in the field. But right now, when you have the options, when everything is clicking perfectly, I don't see a point in risking it. And I guess the downside is you take George Springer's bat out of the lineup if someone else needs a day off their feet. Like, specifically, Vladdy is the guy who that comes up with most often. I know Teoscar's got a few days off. Today, for example, Kirk didn't start because Jansen was behind the plate with Barrios on the mound, and obviously Springer taking that DH spot. But I like, to me, the impact that George Springer has right now, and the status that we know what's going on with, him fouling the ball off his knee and the issues with his elbow, like, it's too much to risk him playing in the field right now. And you can absolutely not lose his bat in the lineup at this point in the season with what the Blue Jays are going through. And of course, their schedule down the line before the season's end in the first week of October. So yeah, I'm totally for it if it keeps him performing the way he is now. And I think it's a conversation the Blue Jays need to have, and over the offseason, certainly address it if they want to get more outfield depth so that he can be a full-time DH if that's what it comes to. And I think that's fine. Do you have any thoughts to add on that?
Not in particular with that, but I guess just to recap before we move on, final numbers through the road trip here. Runs per game was 5.43, run differential was plus 20, bullpen ERA was 1.93, and I guess just a couple other highlights that I had probably throughout this road trip. I think it's been very encouraging from what we've been seeing from Jose Barrios. That's 2 straight starts now where he seems to be back to what we expect him or what we know him to be. I think that's really crucial for the starting rotation down the line. And of course, everything else has been status quo, but I think that's also a really important highlight throughout the last two series is now that you've seen from him. Very important for the starting rotation for that. But I just wanted to throw those final thoughts in there for sure.
Yeah, that's huge. Um, Especially with the struggles that he had gone through, and hopefully, the changes that he made. I think it was bringing his glove up higher when he was getting set, and then also I think it was his left shoulder turning it a little bit more before he threw the pitch. Hopefully, those adjustments pan out, and I mean, so far at least they've panned out wonderfully. I know it's against two, like, obviously offensively potent teams, but teams that have been struggling lately in the Yankees and the Red Sox, but hopefully it can carry over down the line. And this is a conversation not for today, but for later, who starts the third game in a 3-game wild card series. You're going to have 4 starters regardless because of the way that schedules lined up. You're going to need someone to start the first game of the ALDS, but whether it's Stripling or Barrios, I think the next month is going to be very important for determining. But we've already we got enough stuff to talk about today. That's conversation for down the line. The thing to talk about that didn't happen on the field, the Blue Jays or all of Major League Baseball releasing the 2023 schedule. I don't know if there's anything in particular that stood out to you. I know that this is the first time that teams are playing every single team. So the Blue Jays got some cool trips to Los Angeles. They got a cool trip to Colorado. We know that they're going to be playing every single NL team, whether it's in Toronto, whether it's on the road. So that'll be fun. I'm sure there's lots of awesome road trip possibilities for a lot of people. I know you're already eyeing some, but I don't know if there's any specific series that stood out to you, but I'm just excited to get to see every single team.
Absolutely. The way that it was definitely bizarre seeing it in terms of seeing like every single team on the schedule. So I guess what they're doing, I mean, this was the only way that would make sense to me for the NL teams is that, they have half the teams that are coming to Toronto, half the teams that the Jays are traveling to, and then they're going to alternate every year. So, for example, I think the Jays are in LA next year against the Dodgers. In 2 years, I guess they'd be in Toronto, vice versa, like that. So that, I guess, for me, was definitely interesting to see. Of course, also seeing that for AL East matchups. I mean, they're only going to New York, or they're only going to Yankee Stadium. They're only going to Fenway Park, I think, twice. So you play them. I guess you play your AL East division opponents just 4 times. Definitely a lot less, and it's definitely more of a variety for sure. And it's also more of a variety for road trips. I mean, you just mentioned it. I mean, you also had a big road trip in June, or this past June. I haven't had a road trip since the pandemic ended, or I guess, the last couple of years. So I'm hoping to get back on that next year. And the fact that there's more of a variety to choose from is definitely intriguing. So I think that was definitely a highlight for me as well. And the fact that the Jays are going to be, going to all these different NL parks, seeing all these teams that you don't usually see, seeing all these players that you don't usually see. I think that's also for me really exciting. And of course, the other thing too is another highlight is that they are starting the season on that big 10-game road trip. And I believe it was the team, from what I saw, requested that because of the renovations, obviously. So that gives them some time to get that phase 1 renovations done at Rogers Center. And when you think about it too, it's definitely a tough way to start the year in terms of that road trip. But of course, you don't want to think about it too much in advance just because of the season going on right now. And of course, it's just obviously a first glimpse at it next year was definitely intriguing. And of course, the fact that you have all the NL teams that you're going to play, less division opponents. This is I guess, just a way to kind of balance it more for all 30 teams. And for a team like the Jays and the AL East, we all know how competitive it is. It definitely helps them out a lot compared to other teams in a weaker division. So you have that, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself right now because of the rest of the way and how exciting this team is right now. Another fun fact before I throw it back over to you. This is the first back-to-back extra innings road game win for the Blue Jays. First times since April 5th and 7th, 2012 in Cleveland. So when back-to-back extra inning road games for the first time since April 5th and 7th, and that was all the way back in Cleveland in 2012. So there you go.
That would have been the opening series, eh?
It
Wow.
would have been,
So
yes.
basically, including 2012, you've got, can't do math off the top of my head, but basically 10 full seasons since that
Over.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Um, yeah. I mean, I guess we'll close it with this because there's a quote that Arash Madani tweeted that apparently Matt Chapman and David Phelps have been saying this as kind of a slogan of sorts, or I don't know what you want to call it, a mantra, but they've been saying something's happening with the Blue Jays. And I don't know, that just that makes me go crazy because I mean, like what that something is referring to. That we're not going to mention, but you know what it's referring to. Mm, it's exciting, and I will say, like, we know this team runs hot and cold. Before this 6-1 stretch, they sucked, to put it bluntly, and so you can't get your hopes up too much. You have to know that the highs are never as high as they appear, and the lows are never as low as they appear. But something's happening, maybe. Um, okay. Um, we'll be back hopefully at the end of this next series against Los Angeles, which, before I get to the outro, we have to do series predictions for. Bryson, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, we all know how bad the LA Angels have been all year. Jays are riding hot. You got Mitch White going, I guess, tonight now from where we're recording, but Friday night, Alek Manoah Saturday. And Saturday's the marquee matchup, of course. Alek Manoah versus Shohei Ohtani. And that's also the day where the Jays are celebrating the 92-93 World Series team, which is really exciting. It's going to be sold out. I believe it already is sold out. So that's going to be a fun game to attend or watch. And of course, you have Ross Stripling on Sunday. I know Saturday is going to be tough for the offense because it is Shohei Ohtani, but I gotta roll with the sweep. The LA Angels are just a disaster, and I'm
Wow.
really confident that they can do it this weekend. I know.
Wow. I'll play it safe. I'm going to say 2 or 3. That Shohei Manoa matchup, I mean, clear your schedules, 3:07 p.m. on Saturday. That is going to be appointment viewing. Yeah, 2 of 3. I don't have the same confidence as you, but I hope, I hope they
Two or
go
three
on
is
a
fine
six
too.
game
Yeah.
winning streak. Yeah, I mean, 2 or 3 is good. Um, okay. 3 games against the Angels. As always, you can support our podcast by giving us a rating and review. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Just help spread the word about what we're doing here. You can stay up to date with everything we're doing on social media. That's at Section 138 Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And as always, you can support our Patreon, patreon.com/Section 138 Pod. We'll be back Sunday. If everything goes as planned, we'll have Jacob back with us, which will be exciting.
Oh, I can't
We'll have to
wait.
hear all about his vacation. We were trying to arrange a cameo for today's episode. Did not work as it is 12:34 as we wrap this up. But we're excited for 3 games against the Angels. Exciting baseball. And it's about to be September baseball. We'll catch you next time.